Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Laura, and today we're going to be going over an FAQ of questions related to internships, internship hunting, and applications. I'll generally be talking about internships with regards to software engineering or product management internships, just because that's where my experience lies, but if you have any additional questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below, and I'll try to get to them as soon as possible. Let's just dive right into answering some questions today. The first kind of questions that I want to answer today include how to get an internship and interviewing. The first question is, what is the most important requirement to get an internship with X company? Is it GPA, projects, or previous internships? I would say that there's no one right answer to this question. All of the things mentioned here, such as GPA, projects, and previous internships, help build up your credibility and how good of a candidate you are. The stronger you are in each of these categories, of course, the higher chance you'll get of receiving a callback, receiving an interview in the first place, or generally just piquing the recruiter's interests when they're looking at your resume. Obviously, you don't want to be failing school, but I think there is some trade-offs to be had here between dedicating your time on school and dedicating your time to hunting for internships and working on your own projects in your own time. If I had to pick a single category though, I would definitely say that previous internships or experiences are going to be the main thing that people are looking for in recruiting new candidates. However, if you are really standing out in different areas, you still have a great chance of being selected. Another question is, what kind of software engineering project would you recommend working on for your resume or portfolio? I think the number one answer to this question is working on whatever actually truly interests you. I know this isn't always the most satisfying answer, but you are more likely to actually finish projects that you are interested in. Of course, if you just Google top software engineering project, you're gonna get the same kinds of projects. An AI machine that can use facial recognition to do X, Y, or Z, a to-do list, a calendar app. All of this is very rehashed, and I personally think that as long as you're doing something you're interested in and you're having fun with it and you actually go through with it and work on it, then that's going to be a lot better than a project that you just end up shelving because you actually hate it. The other upside to this is when you're talking about a project you're actually truly passionate about, you get excited talking about it. So when you're explaining this project to other people, they can see that you're really enthusiastic, you care about it, and you've put a lot of time and hard work into this project. That's not to say if you just picked a random project that you wouldn't work hard in it. However, I think that a lot of us can see the difference between something that we just willingly do because we have to, and something that we actually do because we're really passionate and enjoy it. Next, what is my number one tip for the software engineering intern interview process? I've shared my thoughts on the software engineering interview process in a previous video, mainly the how to prepare for technical interviews video, but I will add that my number one tip is to communicate. Obviously, yes, it is important to get to the right answer, but it is also helpful if you are able to communicate well. Be over communicative. Because honestly, the more that you communicate and share your thoughts with the interviewer, the more they understand where you're going. So even if you're going down the wrong path, at least the interviewer understands why you got there and how you got there, instead of just thinking, hey, she actually doesn't really know what she's doing. Communication can really save you in the long run, and it also helps build a strong rapport with your interviewer. It shows that you're able to get along with people, you can communicate well with them even if you don't really know them, and it generally hints at strong teamwork skills too. I also want to touch base about the product management role. Some of you may know that I'll be a full-time product manager this coming summer, and I want to do more resources sharing my story of how I got into product management despite being a new grad. One question I have here is, any advice for the PM internship interview process? What are the most important things to prep for and how? So product management is going to be an entirely different beast from software engineering, and if you're aiming for product management roles, again, you should be doing product management specific prep. For many product management roles, they do like for you to have technical background or technical knowledge, so it really does help if you have a computer science background. But generally speaking, product management roles really just want to test your knowledge of product. My number one tip to study for the product management or PM internship interview process is looking at mock interviews online. I found that mock interviews are really helpful for product management interviews just because the way that they articulate and talk through topics is very specific. So a common question that you'll get for product management is, what is your favorite product and why? What is your least favorite product and why? Design X feature for Y product. These are kind of the main cruxes of product management interview questions, and just hearing someone else go over these interview questions can be really helpful to help you formulate a proper response as well. There are also a lot of good books on the subject, such as Cracking the PM Interview, The Sacred Seven, which is a book that I recently finished, and I'd be happy to do a review on some of these books as well if people are interested. So the next chunk of questions that I want to answer here is how to do well in your internships and generally my experience interning. So one question here is, are engineering internships collaborative with other interns, or do you mostly work on your own within your own team? Every intern program is going to be structured slightly different, so some may put you in a group of 3 or 2 and have a coding buddy with you, and some may also just expect you to execute and deliver on a project entirely on your own. Generally speaking, you'll have a fairly high degree of independence working on your project. Your mentor and your manager will always be there for you, and they'll always be able to help you if you're stuck and getting blocked on some part of your project. Usually though, if you're working on a team, you may have a larger scoped project, so there may be more features and requirements to implement, and you'll also be a little bit more tested in terms of communicating and working with people on your team. Next, does the company that you're working at have internal educational resources for interns, or are you usually left to learn on your own? I would venture to say that most companies hiring interns are going to be pretty structured and have a strong base of educational resources for their interns in particular. Every new hire on the team has to learn knowledge somehow, so especially as an intern, they're not expecting you to just jump right on board and know everything that needs to be done. Interns specifically, I know a lot of companies, at least the ones that I've interned at in the past, they have dedicated events such as 2 to 4 hour workshops that walk you through technologies, and often will also send out a repo with the code that they used in that demo, so you can always refer back to it in the future if you need to reference it. So similar to the previous question, the next question says, what are some good coding practices and how can I start implementing these at work? So companies will usually have their own coding practices, so what you have at one company necessarily won't transfer to the next company. I do know that a lot of the larger tech companies will have their own guides on how to format your code, so definitely just ask your team and reach out if you have any questions. Also, for a lot of companies, they have a CI/CD pipeline, or continuous integration, continuous development. Your code will often go through a code review process as well as being checked by linters, so any of these formatting issues will likely be automatically caught for you. So the last question that I want to answer in this section is, are there any CS related courses apart from software engineering and data structures or algorithms that are helpful for succeeding as a software engineer? I think the answer to this question really depends on where you're working and what team you're interning on. If you're hired for a front-end development role, then taking more web dev courses at school are going to be really helpful. My past 2 internships required a lot of heavy front-end engineering work, and even though I didn't have that experience now, I can definitely see that taking an advanced web development course like the one I'm taking now would have been helpful to build up my skills prior to my internship. So the last section that I want to talk about is return offers. Many companies, when they're setting up their internship program, the ideal goal is to convert their interns from interns and students to full-time employees at their company. Obviously, investing into an intern is a lot of money for many companies, so that leaves the question, how can you get a return offer from your internship? Generally speaking, of course, you know what to do. You just have to do your job well. I can really only speak to a company or two, so don't take my advice or answers as being universal for every other company. At a high level, I think this can be broken down into 2 different areas. 1 is communication and 2 is your project. With respect to communication, I'm sure that I've hit this nail over the head many times already, but really communication can't be overstated. The more you communicate, the more in the clear you are with your team, the more your manager understands what you're working on, and the more that your team can actually help you with what you're working on. Specifically, I want to answer a question about how to keep clear communication with your manager. This is probably a very overhashed point of just communicate with your manager and you'll be fine, but it can also be hard to really know how to do that when you haven't been in that situation before. So one tip that I want to provide is just talk honestly with your manager. Don't hide anything because your manager will usually find out in the end. Your manager is going to be the one evaluating you, so having open communication really just sets those expectations a lot more clearly. Second is to just treat your manager like any other person. They really are a person that has genuine human emotions, things going on in their life, etc., and you may even have common interests and hobbies that you share. By taking a little bit of time to focus off of work during a meeting or two, you can set up a better connection with your manager and just get to know them on a personal level. It'll make one-on-ones less scary, and generally you'll just be having more fun in your internship if you try to make friends with the people you're working with. 3 is just have regular meetings with your manager and mentor. The more you have meetings and talk to these people, the more you get to communicate with them, share how you're feeling, share your progress, stuff like that. I know this seems obvious, but sometimes managers can get busy and they push off meetings, so it's really on you to make sure that you're at least having that weekly meeting with your manager to get caught up and make sure that you're all on the same page still. So 2, let's talk about your project. Your project will often be assigned by your manager or your team, and you won't really have as much say into your project. Your manager will also probably give you some guidelines of how to get started, such as creating a design document, going over this design document with your team and manager, and then start implementing and going through test cases and code reviews. Again, be sure to be communicating with your team if anyone else is involved, and generally setting expectations. At this point, once you've dove a little bit further into your project, you may find it appropriate to rescope. Sometimes intern projects can be incorrectly allocated, so you may get a project that is actually way out of reach, or a project that is pretty minimal and you can finish in a couple of weeks. Just be honest and communicate with your manager. So hopefully this brief Q&A helped provide some expectations for your next internship and answered some of your burning questions. If you haven't already, please subscribe and like this video to show your support for this channel. Thank Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!